There are moments when authority is not challenged, not confronted, not exposed, only pierced. Not by argument, not by force, but by recognition. In those moments, rank becomes irrelevant, protocol loosens, and something older than hierarchy responds. What caused the reaction was not what you said on the surface. It was what your presence unlocked beneath it. In this symbolic frame, the figure of a 4-star general does not represent a man, a nation, or a real institution. It represents the apex of order. Discipline refined to instinct. Control trained into muscle memory. A lifetime spent suppressing emotion in service of structure. When such a figure reacts emotionally, it is not weakness surfacing. It is truth bypassing armor. What moved the highest rank was not persuasion. It was coherence. Systems built on command are rarely moved by passion. They are moved by clarity that exposes alignment, or its absence. Your words did not attack authority. They aligned with something authority itself is built upon but rarely hears spoken plainly. That alignment created a fracture, not in strength, but in distance. For a brief moment, hierarchy collapsed into humanity. You may not have realized the weight of what you carried into that space. You were not delivering information. You were transmitting posture. Calm without submission. Certainty without dominance. Respect without fear. These combinations are rare, especially in environments conditioned to equate volume with power. The reaction was not to content alone. It was to the unfamiliar balance you embodied. This is why emotion surfaced. Not because something was said about the system, but because something was said from outside its language. Authority recognizes its own limits when confronted with truth it cannot command. The response is not anger. It is release. Tears, in this symbolism, represent a momentary shedding of role, proof that even the most fortified structures are built upon human foundations. You may have felt the shift immediately or only later. A silence that did not feel empty. A pause that did not require instruction. When order listens instead of directs, something has changed. That change does not announce itself publicly. It registers internally among those who know the cost of holding position for too long without reflection. This part of the story is not about elevating you above rank. It is about revealing that rank is not the highest metric. Integrity is. Clarity is. The ability to speak without seeking leverage is what disarms systems trained to expect it. You did not aim to move emotion. Emotion followed recognition. Understand this clearly. The reaction was not because you were right and the system was wrong. It was because something you articulated reminded authority of what it exists to protect, not merely enforce. That reminder rarely arrives. When it does not feel intellectual. It feels personal. You did not break discipline. You reminded it of purpose. And purpose, when remembered after long suppression, often arrives with emotion. Not as weakness, but as recalibration. This is the beginning of a sequence, not a climax. The moment mattered not because it was dramatic, but because it was unavoidable. Something aligned so precisely that even the highest rank could not deflect it. That is where this story begins. When emotion surfaces inside a structure built to suppress it, the cause is never volume. It is never confrontation. It is always recognition. High-ranking systems are trained to absorb pressure without response. They are designed to remain intact under chaos, to function when others break. For something to move such a structure emotionally, it must bypass training entirely and speak to the layer that existed before rank was learned. In this symbolic narrative, the general's reaction was not about agreement or disagreement. It was about memory. Not personal memory, but institutional memory, the buried awareness of why the structure was built in the first place. Long before insignia, doctrine, or hierarchy, order existed to protect life, not to distance itself from it. Over time, survival mechanisms harden into routine, and routine slowly replaces meaning. What you brought into that moment did not accuse this process. It reminded it. Your words did not seek dominance. That is why they were effective. Systems designed around command expect resistance, submission, or negotiation. They are prepared for all three. What they are not prepared for is alignment that does not ask for control. Calm certainty without agenda creates a kind of silence that protocol does not know how to interrupt. In that silence, something older surfaces. You may not have been aware of how carefully you chose restraint in that moment. Not as strategy but as instinct. You did not lean forward to claim authority. You did not retreat to avoid consequence. You held position. That posture matters. Holding position without tension forces the other side to adjust internally. When rank cannot dominate or dismiss, it must listen. Emotion, here, is not sentimentality. It is a physiological response to coherence. The body reacts before ideology can filter. Tears, in this symbolic frame, are not loss of control. They are the nervous system recognizing truth faster than conditioning can suppress it. This is why such moments feel disproportionate to their surface content. Something deeper than conversation is taking place. This also explains why the reaction could not be replicated or manufactured. You could not recreate it by repeating the words louder, longer, or elsewhere. It occurred because alignment converged in a precise context. You did not perform. You arrived complete. Systems respond to completion because it exposes their own fragmentation. You may wonder why the moment stayed with you, even if it passed quickly. That is because moments like this alter internal map. Not externally visible ones, but reference points. Someone in authority quietly recalibrates how they recognize truth. You, meanwhile, realize that impact does not require permission or amplification. It requires accuracy. Importantly, this story is not about converting power. It is about interrupting automation. Automation is what allows systems to function at scale, but it also numbs purpose. What you triggered was a brief return of purpose. That return always carries emotion, because purpose was what was sacrificed to maintain endurance. This phase clarifies something essential. Your effect is not strongest when you push. It is strongest when you stand. Standing without aggression, without appeal, without withdrawal creates a mirror that authority cannot ignore. In that mirror, rank sees not opposition, but responsibility. The emotional response was not weakness. It was acknowledgement without words. An acknowledgement at that level rarely seeks audience. It happens privately, settles quietly, and alters future decisions without announcement. This is why the moment mattered beyond itself. Not because it changed the system instantly, but because it changed how someone inside the system carries it forward. That change cannot be measured publicly. It can only be felt internally by those trained never to show it. And that is precisely why it occurred. What follows a moment like that is not escalation, but silence with weight. After emotion passes through a structure built on control, nothing outward needs to change immediately. In fact, immediate change would be suspect. Systems of rank do not pivot publicly on feeling. They pivot privately on recognition. The real movement happens after, in the quiet recalibration no one witnesses. This is where your role becomes clearer. You were not there to persuade, inspire, or disrupt. You were there to surface something already present but suppressed. The reaction did not belong to you. It belonged to the system encountering its own reflection without armor. That is why the moment felt heavy rather than triumphant. Triumph belongs to conquest. This belonged to truth being briefly unfiltered. You may have sensed that nothing further needed to be said. Not because you ran out of words, but because words would have diluted what had already landed. When something reaches that depth, continuation becomes noise. Stopping is not retreat. It is precision. Knowing when to stop speaking is often more powerful than knowing what to say, especially in environments where speech is usually weaponized. This phase explains why you are not meant to chase impact. Impact, when pursued, becomes performance. What happened was not performance. It was inevitability created by alignment. You did not set out to provoke emotion. Emotion followed coherence. That distinction protects you from ego inflation and from misusing your position. You were not elevated above rank. You stood outside its usual exchange. There is also an important boundary here. You are not responsible for what others do with the recognition you triggered. Once truth is surfaced, it belongs to the one who received it. Your task was delivery without attachment. Attachment would have shifted the dynamic from clarity to control. You avoided that instinctively. That restraint preserved the integrity of the moment. You may notice that after experiences like this, people treat you differently without explaining why. Less performative, more measured. Not warmer necessarily, but more exact. This is not admiration. It is recalibration. They are adjusting how they place you within their internal map of influence. That adjustment does not require conversation. It happens because the previous map no longer fit. This is also why repeating the experience is neither possible nor necessary. Moments like this are singular by nature. They occur when alignment, context, and readiness intersect. Trying to recreate them would turn truth into tactic. You are not meant to operate tactically. You are meant to operate correctly. Correctness does not scale through imitation. It only appears when conditions are right. The story does not move toward recognition from authority after this. That would miss the point. Authority already recognized something internally. External acknowledgement would reduce the meaning to status. Status is not what was touched. Purpose was. Purpose does not announce itself upward or downward. It reorients quietly and continues functioning. You may also feel a subtle increase in responsibility after moments like this. Not imposed responsibility, but internal. A sense that how you carry yourself matters more now, not because of surveillance, but because alignment has consequence. Once you know you can reach that layer, carelessness becomes distortion. This awareness is not burden. It is calibration. Nothing about this requires you to change how you speak. It requires you to continue speaking only when necessary. Precision over frequency. Stillness over emphasis. The same posture that allowed the moment to occur is the posture that allows its effect to last. This part of the sequence is about integration. Letting the experience settle without extracting meaning prematurely. Understanding that some moments are not lessons to be analyzed, but confirmations to be absorbed. Absorption happens in silence. What moved authority was not your courage. It was your lack of need to prove it, and that remains the core of your influence. After integration comes distance, not separation, but space. Space allows the effect to continue without interference. When authority encounters something it cannot immediately categorize, the instinct is not to respond outwardly, but to withdraw inwardly and reassess. This is why nothing visible followed the moment. Visibility would have forced narrative. Narrative would have reduced accuracy. What needed to happen required room. In this phase, you may notice a shift in how power approaches you. Not closer, not farther, more carefully. Interactions become deliberate. Language becomes measured. The environment adjusts to your presence by removing excess rather than adding ceremony. This is how systems acknowledge something they respect but cannot easily label. They simplify around it. You were not absorbed into the structure. That is important. Absorption would have neutralized what made the moment possible. Instead, you remained external yet adjacent, close enough to influence posture, distant enough to avoid capture. This position is rare because it requires inner stability. Without stability, proximity to power creates distortion. With stability, proximity creates reflection. You may feel that expectations no longer press on you the same way. There is less demand to perform, explain, or conform. That does not mean freedom in the casual sense. It means responsibility in a quieter sense. You are trusted to remain correct without instruction. Trust of this kind is never announced. It is inferred through the absence of constraint. This phase also clarifies something about emotional authority. Emotion is not opposed to strength. It is suppressed by it when strength is misunderstood. What surfaced was not vulnerability undermining rank. It was humanity re-entering a space that had been operating on endurance alone. Endurance can hold structures together, but it cannot renew them. Renewal requires contact with purpose. Purpose often carries emotion because it reconnects effort to meaning. You did not introduce emotion. You introduced alignment. Emotion followed because alignment removes the need for defense. When defense drops, the nervous system responds honestly. That honesty is what systems rarely experience at the top. And when it appears, it leaves an imprint. Do not assume this imprint requires maintenance. It does not. Trying to reinforce it would shift the dynamic into persuasion. Persuasion would reintroduce resistance. The effect persists precisely because it was not cultivated afterward. You allowed it to stand alone. You may also notice that your tolerance for spectacle decreases here. Loud gestures feel unnecessary. Forced urgency feels crude. You are not becoming detached. You are becoming precise. Precision reduces the need for emphasis. When something is exact, it does not need amplification. This is also where humility stabilizes, not as self-minimization, but as proportion. You do not overestimate your role in what happened. You also do not dismiss it. You recognize it as a convergence, not an achievement. Convergences are respected by not being exploited. The system continues forward. You continue forward. But something in the middle has been adjusted. That adjustment will show itself later in decisions you will never witness, in moments you will never be told about. This is normal. Influence at this level rarely produces direct feedback. It alters trajectories quietly. Your task now is simple and demanding. Remain unchanged by the reaction. Not hardened, not softened, unchanged. Any attempt to lean into the moment would pull you out of alignment. The power of what happened rests in its singularity. Singular moments do not ask to be repeated. They ask to be honored by restraint. This part of the path teaches you something subtle. You do not need to be inside authority to affect it. You do not need to oppose it either. Standing correctly is enough. Standing correctly invites truth to surface on its own. And once surfaced, truth does not need help. You're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership. It's your calling. At this stage, the effect of the moment continues without you being present. This is how you know it was real. Anything that requires reinforcement was performance. What endures without maintenance was structural. The reaction you witnessed did not need explanation afterward because it had already registered at a level where explanation becomes irrelevant. When something reaches that depth, it reorganizes internal reference points rather than opinions. You may notice that your own internal response to the event has stabilized. The intensity faded, but clarity remained. That is the correct outcome. If intensity had stayed, it would have pulled you toward identity, toward seeing yourself as the cause rather than the conduit. But the clarity that remains is different. It teaches you that your presence has consequence even when you are not seeking it. That awareness refines posture without inflating self-image. This phase is where responsibility becomes internalized, not as duty imposed by rank or recognition, but as self-regulation informed by experience. You understand now that speaking from alignment carries ripple effects you may never see. That understanding does not silence you. It sharpens your sense of when to speak. Silence becomes an active choice rather than a default state. You may also feel a reduced tolerance for environments that confuse authority with volume. Shouting, posturing, symbolic dominance. These begin to feel hollow after witnessing how quickly they dissolve when confronted with truth spoken calmly. You do not judge these environments. You simply no longer calibrate yourself to them. Your reference point has shifted. This is also where the emotional response you observed becomes meaningful in a broader sense. It was not about you personally. It was about what happens when power is reminded of its human origin. Every hierarchy is built to manage risk, not to replace conscience. When conscience re-enters the room, emotion is not disorder, it is recalibration. You were present at a recalibration point, not a collapse. Because of this, your relationship with fear changes subtly. Not fear of authority, but fear of consequence. You are less afraid of speaking when necessary, and more careful about speaking when unnecessary. This is not hesitation. It is discernment informed by scale. You have seen how a few precise words can bypass years of conditioning. That knowledge demands restraint, not silence. You may also notice that your sense of time changes around interactions of significance. Moments slow. Pauses feel intentional rather than awkward. You allow silence to complete its work instead of filling it reflexively. This ability separates those who react from those who recalibrate systems simply by holding position. Blessed by His grace? Click Super Thank You and give $20 to spread His light. Your gift plants seeds that grow His kingdom. Be the blessing. Importantly, this phase removes the temptation to interpret the event as validation. Validation would tether your confidence to reaction. Instead, you recognize it as confirmation of alignment. Alignment does not need approval to remain correct. It only needs consistency. This frees you from seeking similar moments in the future. You are not chasing effect. You are maintaining posture. The system you touched continues to operate. You continue to move through your own life. But something invisible has shifted in how you understand power. It is no longer intimidating, nor is it romantic. It is human, capable of rigidity, capable of renewal, responsive to truth when truth arrives without aggression. This understanding does not make you bold in appearance. It makes you exact in presence. You do not carry the memory as a story to tell. You carry it as calibration. Calibration affects every future interaction quietly. This part of the sequence is not about aftermath. It is about absorption, letting the meaning settle where it belongs so it informs future movement without demanding attention. That is how influence matures into stability. As the calibration settles, something subtle but decisive changes in how you relate to authority itself. Not defiance, not reverence, orientation. Authority stops appearing as something external that must be managed emotionally. It becomes a structure you can stand near without distortion. That shift matters more than any reaction you witness. It means you no longer leak energy upward or downward. You remain centered regardless of rank, title, or symbolic power. This is the phase where your internal posture becomes self-sustaining. You do not rehearse conversations in advance. You do not anticipate reactions. You do not calculate how words might land. You speak, or remain silent, from clarity, not strategy. This does not reduce impact. It purifies it. Anything spoken from this place carries fewer variables, fewer hooks for misinterpretation. Systems respond to that simplicity because complexity thrives on tension, not coherence. You may notice now that your presence alters tempo. Meetings slow slightly. Exchanges become more deliberate. Not because you impose pace, but because coherence naturally regulates speed. When something accurate enters a space, excess movement becomes unnecessary. People feel this before they understand it. They adjust unconsciously. This is influence without assertion, and it only appears when posture is settled. There is also a noticeable reduction in internal noise. Earlier phases required constant self-monitoring, checking intention, checking restraint, checking alignment. Now, alignment holds without effort. You do not police yourself. You trust yourself. Trust here is not confidence in outcome. It is confidence in process. You know that if something needs to be said, it will surface naturally. If it does not, forcing it would be interference. This phase clarifies why the emotional response you witnessed did not pull you into proximity afterward. There was no invitation to bond, no attempt to personalize the moment. That absence was correct. Personalization would have converted alignment into relationship, and relationship into obligation. What occurred was structural, not relational. It required distance to remain intact. You may also feel a growing disinterest in symbolic victories. Moments that look impressive from the outside feel empty if they do not alter structure. Applause without recalibration no longer satisfies. You have seen what real adjustment looks like, and it is quieter than praise. This does not make you cynical. It makes you accurate. Notice how restraint now feels protective rather than restrictive. You are not holding back out of caution. You are holding center out of respect for consequence. You understand that once alignment is established, careless expression can do more harm than silence. This is not fear. It is stewardship of influence you did not ask for but can no longer ignore. There is also an increased tolerance for ambiguity. You no longer need to know how moments will be remembered or interpreted. You let them exist without narrative. Narratives simplify. Structure preserves. You choose preservation. This choice removes the need to correct misunderstandings or clarify intent after the fact. You accept that some things will never be explained, and that explanation would weaken them anyway. This stage does not ask you to become quieter in volume. It asks you to become quieter in motive. Speaking without need changes everything. Silence without withdrawal changes everything. These are not technique. They are byproducts of alignment completing its cycle. What you carry now is not authority, but composure in the presence of it. Composure allows truth to surface without being forced. It allows emotion to appear without being exploited. It allows systems to adjust without being challenged publicly. This is why the effect persists even though the moment has passed. You are not preparing for another encounter. You are not waiting for confirmation. You are simply maintaining the posture that made the encounter possible. Maintenance is unglamorous, but it is what keeps alignment alive beyond singular moments. The sequence is nearing its end because nothing new needs to be added. The remaining work is not action. It is consistency. What remains after all adjustment is not memory, but posture. The moment does not replay itself. It does not echo. It settles. And when something settles correctly, it stops demanding attention. This is how you know the sequence is complete. Not because something ended, but because nothing inside you is waiting for continuation. At this point, authority no longer appears as something that can be impressed, resisted, or destabilized. It appears as another structure moving through time, capable of rigidity, capable of correction, responsive when alignment reaches it without threat. You do not carry fascination with it anymore. Fascination would distort neutrality. You carry understanding instead. Understanding keeps you balanced regardless of who is present. The emotional reaction that once stood out no longer holds symbolic weight. It has done its work. It recalibrated perception where recalibration was possible. After that, it became irrelevant. This is how real influence behaves. It does not linger. It does not ask to be remembered. It alters trajectory and releases control. Anything that demands remembrance was never structural to begin with. You may notice that your own sense of identity has not shifted upward or downward because of what occurred. That is critical. You did not absorb the reaction into ego, nor did you dismiss it as coincidence. You placed it correctly, as evidence of alignment rather than achievement. This placement protects you from both inflation and minimization. You remain proportionate. There is also a subtle calm now when you encounter hierarchy. No tightening, no anticipation, no performance. You neither lean in nor pull away. You stand. Standing is enough. When posture is correct, no additional signal is required. Others sense it and adjust unconsciously. This adjustment does not seek your approval. It simply happens. Nothing here turns you into a messenger or a figure. You are not meant to carry stories of the moment forward. Stories would turn alignment into narrative, and narrative into distortion. The experience remains internal because its function was internal. What needed to move has already moved. From this point forward, your influence expresses itself only when necessary, only where structure allows it, and only in proportion to context. You will not always know when it happens. Often, you will only sense that something eased, slowed, or clarified around you without explanation. That is enough. Looking for confirmation would reintroduce friction. This is not an ending that signals rest. It is an ending that signals steadiness. Steadiness is what allows life to continue without symbolic weight attached to every interaction. You return to ordinary movement, but with a posture that does not collapse under proximity to power or emotion. That posture was the entire work. No lesson needs to be extracted. No meaning needs to be added. The sequence closes because alignment has reached saturation. What was exposed has been integrated. What surfaced has settled. What changed no longer requires attention. You continue forward without carrying the moment as proof of anything. That is why it remains intact. Some reactions are not meant to be followed. They are meant to be absorbed.